welcome to UFO Classified. This is obviously a switch for me because I'm here on a Saturday night, and I'm very excited to interview my guest this evening. This is going to be a great show. I appreciate him taking time away from his family to be here, and I appreciate all of you for taking time out of your Saturday night to be here. As you know, UFO Classified is a listener-supported show, and right now, thanks to all of my wonderful Patreons, I'm receiving $150 a month in donations to help with the show, and I want to thank all of you for doing that. And that is just really not enough to cover expenses for the show, so if you can get in there tonight and donate, I appreciate that. It helps keep me on the air and helps keep me moving forward. I want to just say thank you to Mario, who is always here, and thanks to Peter, who is always promoting me on social media. That means the world to me. And I'm truly doing this for all of us and to get the truth out. I want to just really quickly, before we go into my wonderful interview tonight with Jeremy McGowan, I want to talk a little bit about some news that I have seen in the past week, and it has really shaken me to my core. And I think if we don't talk about things like this, we would be really remiss. There was a wonderful, beautiful young man, Christian class, 22 years old, that didn't have an aggressive bone in his body. And I'm quoting from an article by Andrea Blanco, family of Colorado man shot by police moments after making a heart shape. And his family has gone out there publicly. It's just absolutely tear-jerking, asking for justice because of the way the police department terrorized him and handled him until he was shot. This 22-year-old, and I'm going to read a portion of this article, 22-year-old Christian Glass didn't have a single aggressive bone in his body, his mother, Sally Glass, said on the verge of tears during an emotional press conference on Tuesday. She said he was a kind and gentle soul who loved art and nature and spent the last days of his life painting pastels in Utah. During his last moments, Mr. Glass made a heart shape with his hands that was captured on the same police body camera footage that recorded his killing at the hands of Creek County Sheriff's Officer Deputy Andrew Buin on the night of June 10th. Mr. Buin, 29, and 5 other deputies had arrived at the scene. Mr. Glass called 911 when he crashed his car into a rural road. He was tasered and shot 5 times. Within hours, the sheriff's office issued a statement saying they were able to break out a car window and remove 1 knife, but he rearmed himself with a rock and a second knife. The most staggering things to me, other than you can look at an hour plus footage of the police officers responding to this young man, is the 911 call that he had made, and he was afraid for his life. He had believed that he was seeing skinwalkers and he was being followed by dark apparitions. And you can hear the absolute terror in his voice. And you can see the kindness that the 911 dispatch officer showed to him, but then you see police arriving that clearly have no knowledge of how to treat people who are experiencing a crisis, a mental health crisis. And this brings me to an important point that I want to ask each and every one of you. How in the world can we stand by and promote stories that can't be verified when we know full well that the Skinwalker narrative is absolutely false, the way that the people at Skinwalker Ranch are presenting that narrative? How can we present things as fact when we know that there are people who are experiencing health challenges, mental health challenges? How can we present things to them and pull them into things and give them information that is not in their best interests? And so I say that we have a responsibility as people who have a public voice in this subject to stand up and point the fingers to people who are willing to go out on social media and harass people and promote stories that are not true. And I'm focusing this solely right on Skinwalker Ranch, and you can take that one to the bank. So I think that these people have a responsibility. Either say the facts and say that you don't know what you're talking about, but realize that you're playing with people's lives, and this is just absolutely not okay. So anyway, I just had to go on that rant because it's very important to me. And this is just, I want to thank Lord Ludacris, Philip Jeffrey, Crusher Queen, UFOzondo. Thank you for the sticker and everything. And so I know that tonight we are going to have a few trolls here in chat, but I know that the good people that support my show will be in there giving it right back, because you know what? We've got something to say. And my guest this evening, Jeremy McGowan, has something to say as well. So Jeremy, welcome to the show. And I want to just say you're probably taken aback a little bit because you were mentioning that, you know, you were just learning a little bit about me, but there you have it. I have, you know, I feel very much like you do, especially with your 3-part series where you're talking about a specific person that we will get into and exposing things that you had gone through and shining a light in areas that absolutely need to see the light of day. And so thank you for being here this evening. And I want to just talk a little bit about what you have done. So you're a trained observer, investigator. You are a veteran of the United States Air Force, and you built what Lou Elizondo, and I'm sure you get other great quotes from people that have seen that, called the world's first mobile UAP tracker, the O.S.I.R.I.S off-road scientific investigation and response informatics system. And you have been heavily into this community. We're going to talk a little bit about that because, like I was mentioning before we started the show, your venture into this started on a Reddit post, and you wanted to know what you had seen. And you got in there, and then one thing happened after another, and I will just let you go into that. And also we'll talk a little bit more about the work that you've done with investigating, and I want to hear that from your own words. But welcome to the show. And so, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. If you hear me clearing my throat like this constantly, I've been in the process of kicking a lingering case of bronchitis that has lasted for about 2 weeks now. So, but I'm alive. I'm breathing, and I'm here. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And you've got such a cute family, your wife and daughter, and I love that. I just thanks for, I mean, I've been looking at your site, and I love what you've done, and I love the interview, the short clip actually that you did talking about Christopher Mellon and some of the comments that he's made, and basically you're saying, hey, wait a minute, what's Christopher Mellon might need to educate himself on some of
Yeah.
the things that are flying around in the sky. And I think that is so true. It's funny to see some of these self-appointed spokespeople of this who are out there and don't know anything about the
Yeah.
topic.
That video, excuse me, I think is a little over a year old, and the backstory on that is Christopher Mellon had come out and he was doing an interview with somebody somewhere. I can't remember exactly where or when, but he was talking about how it was either the USS Russell or the USS Kidd, how what the pilots and the Navy personnel had seen was impossible to be drones. And he was saying that drones could not fly for that long. They couldn't fly for that slow or fast or have the range or the ability. And it really struck me as odd because, this was a year ago, give or take. And we have commercial off the shelf drones. I built my own um, that can do that. So I put that video together and I listed I don't know, 5 or 6 different known drones that were perfectly capable of doing exactly what he said was impossible to do. Um, and it was our technology. It was our stuff. And it just struck me as odd that I forget his exact title. It's like 17 different words, but that his position as the deputy undersecretary of intelligence or whatever it was would come out and say that it's impossible to do that when there's so much open source intelligence information that you can Google and find out that what he said was factually incorrect. So
And I love that.
I felt it needed to be addressed.
Well, and thank you. And that's the thing. I think people assume, and I've made that mistake. before. I think both of us have. It's like
Sure.
you assume because a person holds a position in the government or political position, or they're a movie director, or they're a quote unquote billionaire, just
Yeah.
according to them, that this is, we should take them every word that they're saying seriously, and we should know that shouldn't be the case. And right now, more than any time in history, we need to question people and their motivations and look at who they're hanging out with and the way things are rolling. So I really appreciated that video that you did. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I tend to open my mouth before my brain engages most of the time. But I think in the long run, hopefully people will see that the things that I say are verifiable. You can go out and you can do the same research, you can pull the same information and find the same things that I'm talking about. And even some of the detractors that I have on a personal level that accuse me of certain things, I've clarified it. I've posted the videos that show that what they're saying is factually incorrect and everything. So I'm just kind of here doing my thing.
Well, I mean, I think that's great. And it's interesting because I will just say that there's a certain person that I have addressed, and here are the facts. This is what you said here, and this is what you have not done here to verify what you I mean, you're putting the pieces together, and then you're throwing things out there, and these people either block you because they don't have, they are having a little temper tantrum, or because they can't answer you factually. And I think that's the interesting thing with Lou Elizondo. It's like he's only going on specific shows that promote his narrative. He doesn't have the gumption, or whatever you want to call it, to actually go on shows that have opposing viewpoints. And I think that speaks volumes. And as well as I could throw out people like, Gary Nolan and some of these people, unless you're willing to promote their narrative, you're done.
You know, I haven't put a lot of effort into looking at Gary Nolan, and I may be wrong in this assumption, but I like Gary. I've never met the man, but I've watched him and I've listened to him, and I like him, and I think that what I'm seeing, and again I might be wrong, is that there's two different versions of Gary Nolan. There's a Gary who is very, very intelligent and deeply embedded into the scientific process within his field, and that the statements that he makes within his field are, from my opinion, above reproach. And then there's the Gary Nolan on the UFO side of life that says things that are very subjective, very open to interpretation, not very cohesive with definitive facts and figures and evidence to back up his claims. But I believe, and this is where I may be wrong, I believe that for the majority of the time, if it's only through inference, maybe, but I believe that Gary is pretty good at saying that it's not known and this is a belief, or this is his assumption. I don't think he's ever come out and said, hey, aliens are here and they're feeding off of our emotional intelligence or whatever, craziness that is out there. But he says things from, or at least I feel that he says things from a position of belief and assumption. But when it comes to the things that he's embedded in his field, I think those are definitive claims with the data and things that back it up. But again, I haven't really spent a lot of time digging into and parsing what he says.
So it is interesting because I remember a few years back when he kind of burst on the scene, he was approaching or working with a handful of people who are really nasty people on UFO Twitter, in the UFO world, and I would dare say a couple of them actually are probably mentally ill. And he approached these people and, hey, why don't you come do this study? and here, give us all your medical information, and hey, let's go here, and oh, guess what, they're extraterrestrials. And so for me, looking back and seeing what he's done, I think if you were, there might be a lot of red flags that would be raised in academia because of his approach, which is not verifying the information he's got, leading people, and then pulling people who are vulnerable into a position where they're disclosing their medical information. I'm just going out there because I think, I do find that quite disturbing, but that's just me.
Yeah.
So, and anybody in chat, if anybody has anything to say, again, I want to thank everybody. Matthew Wright, it's good to see you. All of you guys, Scotty B. Baker, man baby. I love that word. I love that name, man baby. Because that could describe a couple people I know anyway. And so thank you for, talking a little bit about that. But I want to go back to your experiences. And so let's give us your military background, because that is impressive. You've done quite a bit and you've traveled to a few places. And so give us a little bit about that. I'll show some pictures while we're at it.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, I spent 12 years in the United States Air Force. I know that a lot of folks think that the Air Force doesn't really do a lot, but I was not a pilot. I was not in a comfy air-conditioned chair. I was out in the field. I was attached to JSOC, which is Joint Special Operations Command. I spent about two and a half years in the Middle East. During Desert Storm and afterwards. And then I spent almost 2 years in Central and South America being attached to the DEA. So I think in the 12 years that I was in, I managed to set foot in 22 different countries during that 12-year period. Some of those countries don't even exist anymore. Some of them have turned into new countries. But it's interesting. It's a time in my life that I'm really, really glad that I did. Given the opportunity to do it all over again, I don't know that I would.
I can't even imagine. You were young. You were what, 21?
I turned 21 in basic training.
And so, talk a little bit about that experience, because just like so many people, you're young, you're getting thrown into this, and then you're off on a whirlwind.
Yeah, I grew up watching science fiction, Star Trek, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, all of that. And I really enjoyed it. Anything with laser beams and robots I thought was really cool, but I never really put much stock into it, because when the TV gets turned off, reality sets back in and you're fighting with your microwave to try to get it to work. But when I ended up in the military, it was a real eye-opening experience, because I grew up in a very, very small, and I mean extremely small town. I think there's maybe, even to this day, there's probably maybe about 6,000 people in this town, and that's it. Everybody works on a farm or in the oil rigs or the coal mines, and I had to get out of there. And believe it or not, I got a job right out of high school. Right out of my first or second semester of college. I went to college right after high school, and I think about 2 semesters into it, the college decided that we were not a good fit. So I ended up getting a job right after that in North Carolina at IBM. That was my first real entrance into the normal workforce. And of course, I didn't fit in. I had long hair. I rode a motorcycle, and I was kind of a pariah at IBM. And I remember very vividly that I was on my way home from work riding my motorcycle, and it had been a really kind of a crappy day at work. And every day that I rode home, I would pass this military recruiting station. And right after I had that bad day at work, I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and I just flipped into the parking lot and basically signed up on the spot. I had taken the ASVAB test and everything just a few months before that, and all my records were in place. And the guys asked me what I wanted to do, and And I told them, I don't know, I just want to shoot guns and blow things up. And they're like, okay, well, sign right here. We're going to make you an Air Force Security Forces police. So, or security police officer. And then I ended up in the delayed entry program, being told that I could enjoy the rest of the summer, which was the first lie, because just a few weeks after that, I got a phone call saying, hey, you're shipping out. Grab your stuff and go. Ended up in basic training in Texas, and then technical school also in Texas, and then ended up in Fort Dix, New Jersey, which is an Army base, going through machine gunner school, and then got assigned to Pope Air Force Base, got my ticket into JSOC, and I think out of the 4 years that I was assigned to Pope, I was only on the base for maybe 5 or 6 months. I spent the vast majority of that time deployed or on temporary duty assignments or doing other things elsewhere. Got out, went into the reserves, got a phone call while I was in the reserves asking me if I wanted to go back to the sandbox and play a little bit. Accepted the offer, got activated, ended up back in the reserves. That's when I had my first sighting when I was deployed over in Jordan, and then went from the reserves back to active duty and ended up spending the rest of the time in active duty. Was assigned to Eglin Air Force Base, but again, out of the time that I was assigned to that base, I was only on the base for a brief moment in time, going back and forth to Central and South America most of the time. So it was a whirlwind. And then when I got out, a lot of people have a real difficult time transitioning from military life back to civilian life. And it was the same for me, because I tried to go back to school. I tried to go back to college and finish out my degree, but I was surrounded by 18-year-old kids who thought they knew everything, and I couldn't take it. I could not take it. I spent my GI Bill learning how to fly an airplane.
Wow. How cool is that? Are you still flying?
No, I'm not. I didn't know it at the time, but I needed these things. So when I was looking at my my knee board with my nav chart, and then looking outside to do dead reckoning, and then looking back down and looking up at the instruments, I started getting sick, because my eyes were taking a long time to focus at extreme distances to close distances and back and forth, and it would actually make me sick. So I gave it up, and then once I realized I needed glasses, I hadn't gone back to start flying again.
Wow. Well, it's probably a good thing for public safety. Good for you.
My flight instructor told me that I was probably the best mechanical, meaning physically operating the aircraft pilot, that he had ever trained, but it was the rules and regulations that I tended to always screw up.
Well, that's, whatever you are, be a good one. But I mean, that's very, really impressive. And so I wanted to flash forward, and I know that people that follow you have heard your story, but there are some younger people or newer people to the subject that have not really understood your insertion point into the UFO world. And so if you could talk a little bit about how your Reddit post and then how things developed there, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So, and forgive me, I suck at dates. I can't remember my own birthday half the time, and I don't have my notes in front of me. So if I make a mistake on a month or a day or a year, please forgive me. I'm giving that disclosure right now, but I believe this would have been roughly 2018, 2019, give or take. And I had just gotten out of a really messy divorce and wasn't my best self. Really honestly suffering through a lot of severe, deep depression. And it was pretty bad. I mean, just basic self-care things like remembering, or not even remembering, but caring enough to go brush my teeth or comb my hair and things like that. I wasn't doing it. I pretty much sat on my sofa for the vast majority of the time and closed the door to my house and didn't associate with anybody or anything. And it was during that time that I was watching television. I flipped on, I had insomnia. I flipped on the television, some streaming service, and I ended up catching an episode of the History Channel's Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. It was season 1 at that time. And the episode that I was watching showed some military guys out in the desert, and it triggered a memory. Watching that scene in the TV show triggered a memory of what I had seen back in 1995 when I was in Jordan. And I hadn't really thought about it for the 23, 24 years after the event up until seeing the TV show. And then all of a sudden, everything that was in the back of my head just kind of came to the front of my head, and it became a very intrusive thought. And I remembered that there was somebody with me during the event in Jordan, and I wanted to find out who that person was, because I wanted to talk to them to validate or not validate my memory of that event. And I had no clue who this person was. But Reddit is filled with internet detectives that can dox people and find out just about every aspect of your life.
Right.
So I went to a veteran subreddit, and I posted a fairly generic description of the events that occurred in Jordan, and asked for help trying to locate the guy that was with me. And the folks on the veteran subreddit had told me to post it in the UFO channel. And I didn't even know at the time that there was a UFO subreddit. So I did. And that post still exists to this day. You can find the link for it. But the guys on the UFO subreddit told me that there was this TV show that was looking for military veterans and folks that had experiences to come forward and tell their story. And they told me that at the end of the show, there was an email address, and I could write to them at that email address. So, ironically enough, it was the same show that I had seen. It was History Channel's Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. So I paused it at the very end, and I saw the email address, and I wasn't really in the mindset of disclosing everything or taking the time and effort that was required to go through. And so I cut and pasted what I had written in the Reddit subforum into an email, shot it off to the TV show. And God, I can't remember if it was 6 days or 6 weeks. I think it was about 6 weeks that went by, and absolutely nothing happened. Hadn't heard back from anybody. And all of a sudden I get a phone call from this lady by the name of Jessica Phillips. And Jessica was the executive producer of that TV show. And she said that she had read the story. She had passed the story around to the other folks on the TV show. They had even bounced it off of Lou Elizondo, who had vetted the details of my story. And they were interested in knowing if I wanted to come on and talk about it. And I didn't really want to be on TV. And she asked me why I would have emailed the television show if I didn't want to go on TV. And I told her straight up, I was like, listen, I went to Reddit because I wanted Reddit to help me find the person that was with me. And then on the off chance that the TV show has the resources and personnel to do the same thing that Reddit couldn't, that's why I reached out to you guys. I want help finding the person that I was with. And they promised me everything. They said that they had a team of investigators. They would dig into it. They would find corroborating people and evidence and stories and stuff like that. But I had to go on TV and tell my story. So I tentatively agreed to it, and I didn't really even make up my mind to say anything, even on camera, until the moment that I walked into the studio in New York. They had flown me from Las Vegas to New York, and when I walked in, there's Lou Elizondo, shook my hand and guided me to a chair and sat down and started asking me questions. And honestly, it was the way that he presented himself. It was the fact that the crew and the camera guys and the sound engineers, nobody was laughing, nobody was snickering. It was a very, very professional atmosphere. And I was put at ease enough that I decided to open my mouth and tell the story of what had happened back in 1995 in Jordan, thinking that the TV show would come through and help me find the guy that could corroborate my story for me. At the end of the interview, they thanked me, put me on a plane, and flew me back to Las Vegas, and still never found the guy that I was with. Your mic is cut off again.
Thank you. Thank you for being my producer and my guest. This is fabulous. But I mean, that must have been, a surreal experience. And, again, you've got somebody who's got this imposing presence, Elizondo, and he talks a good talk. I mean, he's very ingratiating to people that come in contact, from what I understand, and he knows how to use the buzzwords that hook in people that have been in the military and in different things. And so that must have been a whirlwind of an experience. And it reminds me a lot of kind of how I, in all of this, got introduced to one person who introduced me to another person who was giving me this information and pulling the wool over my eyes and getting me to promote a story to make money for them.
Yeah.
And it's just like, the whole thing is just unbelievable. And so you did this initial interview, and then how did things roll from there?
So it was really kind of a long dead time after the interview. Nothing was really occurring. I think it took several months after the interview for the TV show to even come out, maybe nearly a year. But as soon as the TV show came out and as soon as my episode aired, everything started to change. I started getting phone calls, emails. People were contacting me to come on podcasts and things like that to talk about it. I didn't even know UFO Twitter was a thing at that time. I think the very first person that contacted me was Ryan Sprague, and I told my story on his podcast, and obviously was able to go into a lot more detail about the sighting and things like that on his podcast, because even after being interviewed for like an hour and a half for the TV show, I think I only had maybe 8 minutes of airtime or something like that, and the vast majority of the details were cut and left on the editing room floor. But I got a chance to elaborate on Ryan Sprague's podcast, and then I got another call from Andrew Hall, who at that time was hosting a podcast called Dead Hand Radio.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and Andrew's super nice guy. He lives here in Las Vegas, not terribly far from me, and we met at a Chili's and had a burger and a beer and just kind of met face to face for a little while. And he talked to me and then invited me on the podcast, and I went on his podcast, and then it was on that podcast, and it was a very pivotal moment, where he asked me what I thought ufology needed. And keep in mind, at that time, I wasn't even really familiar with what ufology was. I mean, I had seen Close Encounters, and I knew who Dr. Hynek was, and I had heard of Jacques Vallée and people like that. But as far as ufology in the grand scheme of things I had not really any idea. But I thought about it for a second, and I just kind of spewed out the fact that I thought that ufology needed a standardization of data collection, a singular method, a singular process, similar equipment that was within reach of everybody, that could photograph, record, and obtain data in the exact same way, regardless of who was using it. Because I thought that the disparity between everybody's cameras and phones and I felt that equipment could compensate for expertise. And I felt that if the equipment had been standardized, that we would be a lot further along in understanding than we are. And during that interview, Andrew had asked me if I had ever heard of Skyhub, and I hadn't. And he started talking about it. And here at my workstation, you see my other monitors. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 monitors set up here. I switched over to another monitor while Andrew was still talking, and I started Googling what Skyhub was. And I was reading it as he was telling me the description. And I actually started ordering pieces to build my own Skyhub as I was being interviewed by Andrew. And that's really where it started, because I started putting together the Skyhub unit. I built it right here on this desk. And once I had it functional, I came to the realization that I live in Las Vegas. This is literally the brightest city on the face of the earth. Every single light bulb ever exists here in Las Vegas.
Yes, it does.
And I could not imagine how, because I walk outside of my house and I look up and the stars don't exist because there's just so much light pollution. So I didn't feel that this Skyhub unit that I had built would ever be functional here in Las Vegas. And I was like, well, I need to take this thing out into the desert. And then I felt, I started thinking, well, I could put a solar panel on it. I could put a couple car batteries on it, but then I'm going to have to go out and check on it every few days, and it could be stolen or vandalized or anything. I was like, this thing needs to be mobile. This thing needs to be mobile.
Yeah, and I've got to just show this picture. Yeah. Sweet.
That's a
Also
little
fire.
bit
Woo.
after. Yeah, that's a little bit after the Skyhub. But
hello. Well, I mean, let me just bask in this glory. Well, yeah, I mean, I've just got to say, what do people do when you come rolling down the street?
well, to be fair, I don't typically drive around with everything mounted on it.
Are you sure?
I've made a few laps around my neighborhood and gotten a few weird looks. Most of the time, that stuff is set up once I'm out on site. But once the decision to become mobile was made, I literally walked outside. I took a Z-bit, put it in my my drill, and started drilling holes in the roof of that Land Rover, and running Ethernet cables and getting the thing set up so that I could have the Skyhub functioning with the camera that was on top. I only had one camera at that time.
That is such a great picture. Wow.
Thank you. But that was the genesis for what eventually became the Osiris. It was the first iteration was literally nothing other than a Skyhub and one camera in the back of the Osiris, because I needed to get away from the light pollution.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. It's just incredible. And I remember, I think we touched base, oh my gosh, right when you came into this and I was going to have you on the show. I remember that. And it was just everything happened and you were going one direction and I went another. And I mean, I don't know, it's crazy. So I want to just say, hey, I think it's really cool that you're doing field research and that you've gotten out there. I love doing that. And hey, Tim and Bob, I want to just give it just a shout out to Tommy Boyle and people in chat, Ted and Crusher, Man Baby. I just have to keep going back to Man Baby. I love it. It makes me happy. And thanks to all the people that support the show and that are here on a Saturday night. I never do shows usually on Saturday nights. And so this is great to have all of you in here. But and so you get pulled into this. You are genuinely wanting to spend money, your own money, to create something where you can go out and do field research.
Well, I didn't want to spend my own money.
Okay. Well,
I pretty much had to. Nobody's funding this. Nobody's going to come out and give a.
Are you sure?
Well, at that time, so this is what's in my head at that time. I'm looking at myself and I'm like, at that time in my late 40s, very late 40s, And I was like, we're not going to get answers from the government. We're not going to get answers from this or any other government. We've been lied to. We've been told things are X and they turn out to be Y, or vice versa. And it's just been 80 years of crap. And I decided that with that Sky Hub, it really inspired me to see what else I could cram into that vehicle. And of course, it's budget based. I'm not rich by any sense of the word, and I put things together with paper clips, super glue, duct tape, and bubble gum to try to get the stuff to work.
And I just wanted to say I just want to say there's a Todd Turner in chat, and so he seems to have some interesting things to say. But I mean, so you had a GoFundMe page,
Mm.
which good on you. I need to have a GoFundMe page because I know for me, I have spent well over, I mean, I've spent a lot of money on
Yeah.
my pet project, collecting research, housing that research, doing my show. I will never recoup what I put into this subject. And
Yeah, I started the GoFundMe page, which I think that first one, I've had two. I think the first one got maybe right around $300. I think it raised about $300, and with that, I was able to get the NVIDIA Jetson, which is the backbone of the Sky Hub unit. So it was, but I think I'm estimating here in my head. If I go back to day one, where I started drilling the holes in the roof of the Land Rover, I've put probably about $40,000 into this. And I think with the TV shows that I've done, I didn't get a dime from the movie. Nobody in UAPX realized a single dime. We don't get royalties. We didn't get paid nothing from the movie. But I've done a couple TV shows since then. Obviously been on Skinwalker, and I think in total I've gotten close to the $5,000 mark.
I mean, isn't that I've got to just say that people are assuming, oh my God, you're on a TV show. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. Some of us get thrust into this and we don't know how productions work. We don't know that they're going to try to get you to fly out to a location for free, not pay for anything, because you are just, you are so special. We want to record you and then make royalties off you, and you don't make any, I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is.
And so, yeah, I just have to go out and say that some of us have learned a lot of lessons in this, and I wanted to show this from your time at the ranch.
Yeah, there's the Skinwalker crew, Gary and I sitting in the back.
That must have been interesting.
Skinwalker was a unique experience. We got the invite right during when we were filming the movie A Tear in the Sky, which ironically that's the first time I've actually said it correctly without correcting myself. I still refer to it as a tear in the sky,
Right? Yeah.
but it's tear.
Okay.
It's a tear in the sky. So yeah, we were on location in Laguna, overlooking Catalina Island, or the Catalina Channel, and the director and producer of the movie knew Travis Taylor, and gave him a call, and he comes out and he meets with us on location there, and he sees the equipment that we have set up on the roof, and he sees the Osiris vehicle, and a couple days later I start getting emails saying from Prometheus Entertainment, saying that they wanted us to come out and do an investigation on the ranch. The problem was that we were under a very strict NDA with the movie production that we were involved with, and we couldn't really do an investigation until the NDA and the non-compete came out, because the producer of the movie didn't want us doing anything that was even remotely similar to what we did in the film on the off chance that that production would come out before the film was released. So after going back and forth 3 or 4 times with Prometheus and with our producer of the movie, we agreed that just Gary, Jason, and I, without any of the scientists and without any of the other equipment, if it wasn't on my truck, we couldn't take it. But we finally got the go ahead to take the Osiris, and Gary and Jason and I went out to Skinwalker for a few days.
And that must have been interesting.
It was unique, and to be honest with you, I'm still processing what occurred, what didn't occur, the personalities, the things that go on out there. And I'm not ready to call the whole thing BS, because something is going on out there, but let me choose my words very carefully. Nothing that occurred to me or that I witnessed when I was on Skinwalker defies explanation in such a way that it has to be extraterrestrial or paranormal or alien. With enough time and engineering and funding, we can replicate everything that I saw occur out there with our technology that we have now. Whether or not that was what happened, I cannot say. I did not see strange military vehicles poking around or people hiding behind rocks shooting energy weapons at us. So I can't
Did you
definitively.
see any shape-shifting werewolves, hairy beasts?
No, there wasn't a
What?
single dino beaver. No dino beavers, no ghosts.
I mean, sorry, the guy on the ridge who turned into the werewolf, the bulletproof. Man, okay, I'm glad you didn't see any of that. Okay, cool.
No. I mean, we had some legitimately strange things that occurred. But again, I don't know if they were orchestrated. I don't know if they were organic and completely separate from human involvement. I don't know, because I don't have the data. I didn't spend enough time there to look behind the curtain. I didn't spend enough time there to really conduct a proper forensic investigation. And I don't know what the genesis, what the occurrence of those events was. I honestly don't know.
And thank you for being for talking about that. I appreciate that, and I understand that everybody has to be delicate when it comes to NDAs and different things. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Did they ever figure out what happened with Jason?
No, not to my knowledge. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because that is Jason's story,
Okay.
and he's not here. I will discuss what everybody saw on the show, because
Okay.
that's what's available. But Jason had a legitimate episode. I don't know what else to call it, but we're sitting at the conference room table in that picture that you threw up, and Jason was sitting at the far end of the table, and it was at a time where Travis Taylor had asked me what I had thought about the UAPTF report, and looking back on that, I told him exactly what I thought of the UAPTF report, and now knowing that he was potentially involved in at least a portion of the writing of that UAPTF report, he probably didn't take too kindly to my response on it. Now I kind of feel like it was a setup, but anyway, I was in the process of answering Travis on what I thought about the report, and that's when Jason started putting his hands on the temple of his head, and then he crossed over his arms and put his head down on the table, and he was in bad shape. He was in really bad shape. He started profusely sweating. This is about as fast as I can move my hands. Jason's hands were in convulsions faster than I can physically move my hands. Um, Dragon and the rest of the crew pulled Jason out, and we put him in that grain silo that's just outside the command center. And the idea was that because that was a metal structure that was directly grounded, and if Jason was in the center of that, if this was something that was being caused by an extreme electromagnetic incident, that the grain silo would shield him. And about 10 minutes after he was put into the grain silo, his symptoms resolved. He was again able to formulate complete sentences. He stopped convulsions, but if you looked at his eyes, it looked like Mike Tyson had just knocked the crap out of him. I mean, like busted capillaries and everything in his eyes. And it was after that episode, he will not go back to the ranch.
Well, I wouldn't go back to the ranch either. But and so what? So you've got, he's going into the grain silo, and then what were the protocols for medical treatment? I mean, was there any were there any doctors that came in to render medical treatment? No.
No, there was no doctors. Obviously, Dragon is in charge of safety and security, and I'm not going to drag the cast and crew and the people of
Okay.
Skinwalker,
Right.
because and I've had this conversation with a few folks. Myself, Gary, and Jason, we're all ex-military. We've all served in combat situations or in direct combat. We've all done things that are a lot more intense than what occurred at Skinwalker. Um, the type of folks that most ex-military people are, unless you're bleeding out, you don't go to the doctor. You shake it off, you rub some dirt in it, you get back up, and you continue on your day. And that's exactly what Jason did. As soon as he was back to normal, he was like, no, don't bother me. I don't want any treatment. Don't, I'm not going to be a liability. I'm not going to interfere with anything. Just let me do my thing. So I think the offer was there to have him seen and treated, but I believe that it was because his decision not to be is the reason that it wasn't.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and thank you. And I want to just that I've got Space Oddities who's in the chat tonight saying Jason was fully medically checked out and is 100% recovered, and so that would be interesting to see that really happened, and what where the verification is for that. But I think that the bigger thing for me in having you have specific people that are saying that there are, on the TV show, dangerous levels of ionizing radiation, and all, and oh, somebody's skull is detached from it, blah blah blah, all of this stuff, and yet, I was at a conference, and I think most of my guests have heard this, but you haven't. But I was up there, and they're making a considerable amount of money, bringing in tourism, and at the end of the day, I wonder what taxpayer money is funding that kind of goings on, which will be interesting. We're certainly, might. Anyway, so you've got Travis Taylor who's promoting this and saying that the danger, and oh my God, people are getting hurt, but we're going to go back and we're going to dig and we're going to do all of this stuff. And yet when I pulled up next to Travis and I just said, okay, so you're saying there are dangerous levels of ionizing radiation, and what are you doing to work with the community and to work with authorities to make sure that other people that are around the ranch or on the ranch are safe? And then he looks at me, well, I'm doing the TV show. And I just thought, okay. I mean, nothing else needs to be said. It is the most, it's like it's just.
It's not It's not operated the way that I would do it if it was mine, but it's not mine. So my opinion doesn't matter. It is private property. It does fall under the providence of Brandon Flugel, and he can do with it as he pleases. The people that are there are not held captive. They're there voluntarily. We went there voluntarily. I would do things differently, but I don't have that ability.
Yeah, no, and it is interesting, and I want to just read a Space Oddities comment, which is interesting. We can talk about our personal experience on the show, but off-camera chats are considered confidential to protect the privacy of the crew and the cast. And I totally understand protecting, the confidentiality of the crew, and they're working, and they shouldn't be exposed to anything. But what about the people who've been involved with all of this and had specific people involved with the ranch come into your studio and, level interesting threats against your family and things? And I want to ask you, because this to me is quite curious. No, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I want to talk
Sure.
a little bit about, because I think this is a relevant thing to both you and I, but I want to talk a little bit about Alex Dietrich and what happened, because when you go to, the Reddit posts and things, you can see there was an exchange between the two of you, and she mentioned a particular thing that had happened with trying to liberate Afghans when all of that was taking place.
Sure.
And if you don't mind, because like I said, and I appreciate your being open to talk about this, but what happened there?
What happened there? It's a very interesting story, and it's kind of disturbing how easily somebody can twist everything, and it just becomes its own living entity in a way that never happened, the way that people think it did. When I was on Skinwalker, there was a guy there by the name of Jim Morris. And Jim is, I believe, the property manager for Skinwalker. He's been on several of the episodes. Large guy, always wears like a black fedora, has a Native American type of vest that he wears quite often. Super nice guy. Type of guy that gives you the impression that he would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. And he had walked over, and he was just thanking us, myself and Gary and Jason, for our service and, all this other sort of thing. And Jim talks a lot. And he told us that he was in the process of working with an organization or a group, I don't remember his exact words, that were involved in helping to get stranded Americans out of Afghanistan. And he gave me his business card, and that was it. And then I saw Alex Dietrich a few weeks later on Twitter talking about how she was involved in a program to get stranded Americans out of Afghanistan. So I pinged Alex and told her about Jim Morris and provided an introduction between them. And that was the extent of my involvement with it. A few days after that, I pinged Alex back, and I asked her if Jim was going to be of any assistance, and she said no. It looked like, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the tweet in front of me, but she said no. It looked like Jim's organization was trying to raise like $3.5 million or something like that to get an aircraft, and it just wasn't going to work out with them and her group. But she thanked me for the opportunity, and she said, and I apologized to her. I was like, well, crap, I didn't know it wasn't pitched to me that way. And she was like, no worries, these things happen, whatever. And that was the end of it. That was literally the end of it. Then we had a guy, I'm not even going to mention his name because he's not worth mentioning, but we had a guy inside of UAPX that was functioning as our first talent agent, I guess you could say, trying to coordinate UAPX with getting exposure on certain TV shows and things like that. And he was let go. from UAPX. And when he was let go, he had come out and he had started attacking almost everybody on the UAPX team. And to try to limit and maximize damage control, I had gone to several podcast hosts. And this was, I'll readily admit, this was a mistake that I made that in hindsight, if I could take it back, probably the worst decision I've made in a long time. But he was let go for a very specific reason, or a string of very specific reasons. And I took screenshots of some of the things that he had been saying in our private chats in UAPX, and I sent them to podcast hosts, warning them that this guy was going to be trying to come onto their show and talk smack about UAPX, and I wanted these hosts to know that he had been let go. So basically what happened is that really triggered him. Because he had been part of UAPX, he had had access to all of our Signal conversations and all of our chats and everything like that. So he started taking screenshots and screenshots and screenshots of all of our internal communications and our discussions. On one of those discussions, we were talking about trying to get Alex involved in the post-production of the movie, Tear in the Sky. And I had mentioned that, hey, I've had some conversations with Alex. And keep in mind, this is myself, Gary Voorhees, Jason Turner, Kevin Day, all ex-military guys. We have a very specific way of talking to each other, which is, basically locker room and R-rated conversations that guys have with each other on a daily basis.
Yes, I remember hearing about some of those things back in the day.
Yeah. So in the conversation, I can't remember if it was Gary or Jason or somebody had asked me if I could contact Alex. And everybody knows that Alex Dietrich is a fighter pilot. Everybody knows that fighter pilots, male, female, doesn't matter. You have an ego, plain and simple, because you are literally the pinnacle of the sphere for the United States. You are the best of the best. You're flying multi-million dollar jets into combat situations for your country. So you're going to have an ego. So I said, I will reach out to her and I will stroke her ego, take her temperature and see if she's interested. And then the conversation went on a little bit, and this is all in text message. And then just for brevity, because you're typing with your thumbs and things like that, I reiterated the fact. I said, yeah, I'll reach out to her, stroke her, and see if she's interested. And I didn't say the second time, I didn't say I'll stroke her ego. I just said I'll stroke her.
Sweet mother.
So the individual that we let go took a screenshot of that, sent it to Alex, who was, and I'm not going to drag her into the mud. I actually like Alex. She was going through a lot of stuff. And I think that screenshot really, really given to her out of context without any understanding of why she was receiving it, it set her off. And we went back and forth a couple times on Twitter, and then everybody started rallying around her because it appeared as if I was attacking a female, a military veteran, a fighter pilot, and a hero of UFO Twitter, all at the same time. And it was totally out of context, and that's not what happened.
And it is interesting because I think UFO Twitter is a place that I will never go. I have no desire to be on there. I'm not quite sure where it started or what sort of science project is going on there, but I think it's really detrimental to anyone that gets involved there. And so that's an interesting, thing that happened with you. And I will say that Alex Dietrich, I mean, she is a badass, and people are saying that it's absolutely, it's amazing. And I know for me, being a female, having some of the experiences that I've had, I mean, being called a whore. I remember having a person that was introduced to me, this has been such a long, ugly period of UFO. It is toxic, but being introduced to somebody, a radio show host, by a person in MUFON, one of the directors, and having him do a series of radio shows about me, saying I'm having menage a trois in the middle of conferences, naming my family by name, doxing me. I mean, it's been just one of those. It is a really hardcore thing, and I think that people that get into this and are involved on UFO Twitter, I would just say get off UFO Twitter. It's not healthy. It's not even a good thing. I've met a few people that I like, but other than that, there's no need to waste my time on that. And I think it is really sad how bullying campaigns can be mounted and good people are pitted against each other. And I'm sure that there's somebody sitting back there, that are look at these idiots and look at the way they're going after each other. And we can just put this little, thing out there, and then all people are.
Can you see this?
Let me just hang on one second. Let me remove.
So this is the message between myself and Alex Dietrich. And you can see her saying that they asked me to contribute $3 to $5 million to fund the private aircraft they're chartering. And I told her that, I said, please let me know if there's anything else I can do. Being a vet, I live by the leave no one behind, but I'll do what I can. And I said that's not how it was presented to me. My apologies. Her reply to me was, no worries. I'm glad they're getting people out through back channels. It's just not the route for me and my folks. I appreciate the introductions and have been trying every single angle possible, hoping that one will produce results. As for anything else I can do, if you haven't registered an email or web form message with your congressman or senator about this issue, please take a moment to go on the record with them in writing. Calling is good, but back it up with a written correspondence. We need to extend the deadline to the 31st of August. I said, understood, and I will. Thank you. This is her words. That is the exact exchange between myself and Alex Dietrich.
And so it is interesting how that gets turned around. And so let's dig into the good stuff with Lou Elizondo, which, again, I will say that your 3-part, series has not only that you've talked about yourself and how you got pulled into things, but let's talk about your, further meetings with him and the way he pulled you into his, his circle.
It's interesting because it started the day before I was interviewed by him on the TV show. I actually bumped into him in the lobby of the hotel the night before the interview was scheduled for the next day. And the studio had put him and I both up at the same hotel there in New York. I can't remember what hotel it was. But I was hungry. I was very hungry. And the restaurant there at the hotel was closed. So I'd asked the check-in desk where I could get something to eat. And they said there was a little deli down the street. And I turned around. And as soon as I turned around, I literally bumped into Lou Elizondo. And I was like, hey, you're interviewing me tomorrow. And we stepped over to the side, stayed in the lobby, but we stepped over to the side out of people's way and had a conversation for almost an hour till my stomach started reminding me that I was on a mission to go get a sandwich. And I don't remember exactly what was said in that conversation. All I can remember is thinking that, why am I being told this? These are things that, I don't have a clearance. I'm not in a need to know. These seem to me to be things that I probably shouldn't be being told from the director of ATIP. It struck me as odd, but if he's willing to say it, I'm willing to listen. And that was the genesis of everything right there. And honestly, it never really stopped.
And this has been something that I've heard from other people who've been pulled into the fray. With this, it's like you're being given this peek behind the curtain, and you're being told you can get, we're going to, upgrade your security clearance. We're going to do this and that. And hey, let me show you a photo on, my iPhone, which isn't secure, but this is a top secret photo, and, yada, yada, yada. And yet people are, oh my God, they're it's like, okay, this is not the way it rolls. If you really are who you say you are.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so this happens, and then give us a little more detail on further interactions with him and some of the other alarm bells that you had about him.
I didn't really have any further interactions with him for quite some time, nearly a year, until after the show came out. And once the show came out, I joined Twitter and things like that, and I started posting photos and little video snippets of me building the Osiris and assembling the Sky Hub and things like that. And there was a guy by the name of Jake Mann who at that time ran a podcast called It's Redacted. It was him and his wife, and it was extremely well produced, very detailed research, very good production quality. I mean, it should have been a television show instead of a podcast. But Jake calls me up one day, and he's like, "Hey man, I've been following you. I've been watching your progress on the vehicle, and I'd kind of like to document this. I'd like to, follow you through your journey and get this on camera." And I hit it off with Jake, started talking to him, and I told him I was like, I'm not really terribly interested in having a show about this. I'm old and fat, and you can see me grunting and groaning every time I try to climb up on the roof of the vehicle. I'm not sure that makes for good entertainment. But he was convinced that what I was doing was worthwhile documenting. So we continued our conversations, and then about a week or so later, I get another phone call from a guy by the name of Justin Tandy. And Justin was part of a two-man operation on another podcast called I Believe in Humans. And it was Justin Tandy and Dustin Hoyer. And together they had done the I Believe in Humans thing, where Jake was a producer. Justin and Dustin were directors and cinematographers, but they had pretty much the exact same question for me. They were like, "Hey, I've been watching you, seeing what you're doing with the vehicle. We'd like to make a movie." And I was like, "Well, I just had a conversation with Jake. He wants to document it." So I ended up putting Jake Mann in conversations with Justin Tandy and Dustin Hoyer. And then it became a three-way conversation where we were all sitting down and talking about putting this documentary together about me building this crazy vehicle, going out and looking for data. During that time, it was also when I was becoming more involved on the UFO Twitter side. And as you know, there's a colorful cast of characters within UFO Twitter. And most of the people are behind screen names. You don't know who they are. You don't know what their backgrounds are and things like that. And I was getting inundated with text messages and direct messages and public tweets from people I had no idea who they were or what they were coming from or anything. And I needed help sorting through the personalities, trying to figure out who I could trust, who I couldn't trust, who just wanted something from me. I had no idea. So I had a call sheet. I had a call sheet from the TV show that I was on, and they list several of the episodes before and several of the episodes back, and Sean Cahill's phone number was on there, and I contacted Sean, and he and I started talking, and he was literally helping me trying to figure out who's who. who is related to who does what, who works where, things like that, so I could kind of get the lay of the land. And we started talking almost on a daily basis. I mean, we would have conversations that would last hours, and we would talk about literally everything regarding the phenomena. Some really crazy conversations. But as time went on, this project with Jake and Justin and Dustin kind of started to get solidified a little bit more. Like they were really showing their level of interest in documenting this. So I told Sean, I was like, hey, you want to be part of this? Because I had known he had been on the TV show and things like that. So, and we were both military, and I invited Sean to become part of this documentary process. So like, hey, if this turns into anything, you can be in the right seat of the vehicle as we go drive around the United States looking for little green men. He jumped at the opportunity, and as time went on, Sean got Lou involved, and once Lou got involved with it, that was about the time that things started to change from being a documentary to whatever name you could put to it that's not a documentary. But by that time, with the conversations with Lou, the emails, phone calls, Zoom meetings, things like that, I hadn't been to his house yet. In retrospect, looking back on everything, it now feels very artificial. At the time, it didn't. At the time, my God, I ate it up. We were going to change the world. We were going to bring disclosure. We were going to be, the heroes that our grandkids could look on and say that, Jeremy and Jake and Dustin and Justin and Sean, we brought disclosure to the world. And I ate it up because, if you remember, I was still going through serious depression. I was still going through that isolation aspect. I was coming out of it, but when you're in that mental state and somebody says, "Hey, man, you're going to be a hero," you eat it up. You can't even stop yourself. And that's how I got really sucked into it, because I could do no wrong. If I came up with an idea about, hey, I think this is what the phenomena is, they're like, yeah, you're on track. Keep on that line of thought. That's absolutely probably right. You're doing the right thing. And then a week later, I would come up with another crazy theory. And they're like, yes, absolutely. That's, I've heard those things too. And, it didn't matter how crazy of an idea that I had to attribute it to the phenomenon. They never said no.
And I mean, it is really interesting, for me as well, to kind of go back and, look at the way this person came into my life and to look at the information they gave me, and, oh, your show is so important, and, you're doing this and that. And it's just like, I mean, these people are skilled master manipulators. And, I think when, especially when you're going through a time like you have been very open about, you're going through, you're depressed, you are suffering from PTSD, there are all of these things taking place, and it is, you're looking for something greater, you're looking for a cause, you're looking to try to make a difference. And I think that is, for me, that's what, I mean, I've been involved in that. I think a lot of people that are listening to the show tonight, it's like, this is where we are.
Yeah.
And so I think this is really important. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again because there are new people listening. But when I was up at the conference near Skinwalker Ranch, I was just so sickened by the people at the ranch who were knowingly pulling in people who were military veterans, who had that people that need to be protected, people that need to be respected, and people that are being manipulated. And I saw other people in the community, which I've known these people for a long time. I've done a lot of research, and I care very deeply about the people in that area who are being conned and manipulated, and being, it's like this cult like mentality. You're special. We need to, put you, we're going to parade you through this conference, and look how great you are. And then we're going to pull you into our little conference room. And it's just really, it's sick. It is really sick. So,
Yeah, not to jump ahead too
yeah.
terribly far in
Yep.
the conversation, but after I wrote those first 3 articles, my email has blown up, and I have been contacted by a lot of people who were in the process of being recruited by Lou for similar things, and by and large, for the most part, most of them have said that they realized that something was off early on, and they pulled out themselves. There was a couple that said that they didn't realize it until they were really in. But the word that seems to be used more than any other word is that they're describing this to me as they felt as if they were in a cult. Now, I have to be honest, I did not feel as if I was in a cult. I didn't feel anything other than appreciated. And again, in retrospect, now looking back, that appreciation feels artificial. But at the time, my God, I needed it. I needed them to be saying the words that they were saying to me. Um, but yeah, there's been a lot of people that have come out to me, none publicly that I know of, and have told me that that at least the third part of the story that I wrote, they said it really rings true to their experiences as well.
And that's interesting. And so I want to ask you a little bit more. So you get kind of ingratiated into this world where you're being appreciated, and there are, from what I understand, there are meetings behind the scenes where people, I mean, it's like, we're having this meeting, and go team, and you're given kind of like, the rank, you're filing into it's like a military structure almost. And I've
Yeah.
heard this from several people that I've spoken with over the past year, year and a half. And so, what was a typical meeting, like, that you were having behind the scenes? How many people were there, and was Lou there more often than not, or was there somebody else taking the lead?
No, Sean made it clear to us, and by us I mean myself, Jake, Justin, and Dustin. Sean made it clear to us that he spoke for Lou. Lou would come into the chat every now and then, but by and large, for the most part, the information that we were being given was being channeled through Sean. And to be honest, most of our conversations revolved around how we're going to approach this documentary, what we're going to do, how we're going to frame a shot, how, who we're going to interview, where we're going to drive the Osiris, things like that. But then in the meantime, when I was still, trying to tweak the Sky Hub and get it working and things like that, there was a lot of speculation, a lot of discussions about the phenomenon, and Sean was, it was interesting because to me it felt very two-sided, but not necessarily two-sided in a bad way. I am, and with the exception of a couple months, have always been very hard-coded towards data, actionable data, science. I might not be able to understand it. I can collect it and give it to somebody smarter than me that can interpret it. But I've always wanted the data. But there was a time there when I don't know, something got in my head, and I was really, really accepting the idea of the woo. And Sean would have conversations about this control construct and the fact that, the dark forces were feeding on human emotions, and that we were caught in this was like a purgatory of sorts, where it's a cyclical process and we're constantly recycling humanity over and over again until
Oh
we
my.
get it right.
Okay, I'm sorry. I need to like bathe in holy water. Freaking really? I
I
mean, did
ate
he?
it up. Oh my
I
God.
mean, I know, and I mean, I granted we've. I mean, I think we've all gone there, but I mean, did is he related to Hal Puthoff? Is there some sort of? I mean,
No,
wow.
I ate it up. I called my vehicle the Osiris because of this. Sean had told me a story, anecdotal, I'm sure, maybe out of a Jacques Vallée book. I don't know. I haven't read them. Where he was saying that Sean believed that Osiris, the ancient Egyptian god, was actually an artificial intelligence that was being used by, the pharaohs and folks like that to maintain control over the human population. And he even likened the symbol of Osiris, which is kind of a modified Ankh that has some lines going through it. He likened that to the modern iconography of data stacks and hard drives and things like that, to kind of pair the idea that, yes, Osiris was an ancient artificial intelligence. So the reason I called my vehicle the Osiris and then came up with a backronym to make sense of it was because I thought it was going to be really poetic justice to use artificial intelligence to find ancient artificial intelligence that had screwed over humanity. I mean, I was eating this up.
Oh,
In looking back on it, I don't know where my head was, because to take ideas like that and use them in your daily life in a decision making process is ludicrous.
yes, it is, and we've all. And thank you for your. I mean, thanks for just being so forthright about that. And I think that's really important because I mean, we've gone down. I mean, like I've mentioned before, I was married to somebody who was seeing a shape-shifting hairy beast standing on Skinwalker Ridge. I mean, we've all. I think most of us have in this subject have been down the rabbit hole, and thank the Lord above that we actually have the foresight and the skills, the intellect to kind of go step back and say, wait a minute,
Yeah.
there's no proof. Wait a minute, these guys have been jerking our chains for 50 plus years. It's the same group of people. There's, I mean, it's like, and, I mean, they're victims falling by the wayside. It's really insane. And so I want to ask you, okay, so you've got Cahill talking about these things. Do you think he believed that, or do you think that he was just promoting a narrative that these people wanted to put forward?
I don't know. I don't want to assume.
Okay.
Everything that I put into the articles, quotes, if it's in bold italics with quote marks around it, it was said, and I have proof of that, similar to the Alex Dietrich post. I can go back and I can pull those up to show that if they were bold, italicized, and in quotes, it was said as is. To assume why, it's not what I do.
Okay.
I don't understand the motivations of people, and I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to accuse Sean Cahill of doing something for a nefarious reason. I don't know if Sean Cahill was complicit. I don't know if Sean Cahill didn't know what he was doing. I don't know. So I don't want to assume either side.
Okay. And it is interesting. And so what is Sean Cahill, what is he doing now? Do you know what he's up to? Is he still involved in
I I,
this or?
I have not spoken to Sean since the end of the project, since I walked away from that film project, and that's not entirely accurate. I had one text conversation with Sean several months, or maybe several months, after I walked away from the film project, where I saw him put out a tweet, and I don't remember the tweet that he said, but it sounded like he was in a really bad place. And I reached out to him saying that, hey, I know things went sideways between us, but if you need to talk about anything, I'm willing to listen. And he said, no, all good here. And that's the last thing that I'd ever said to him.
I will say that I hope, you always want the best for people, and I would invite him to come on the show. And, it's people get wrapped up in this, and I hope he's not, I hope that hasn't been the case for him. I know it has been the case for me. It's clearly been the case for you and many other people who've been, that have gone through all of this. And it's, Matthew Wright brings up a really great point when he's hearing some of the things that you're talking about, and how much what he's saying sounds like Scientology, which again, you've got the put off influence, and you've got some of these, people promoting that. But it's just,
the Scientology aspect is interesting. I don't know much about them, to be honest, because I've never really cared to. But I will say that, and I did not put this in the article, when I was up at Lou's house, I was voicing a concern to Lou that Hal had been involved in Scientology. This was right after Lou had said that he wanted us to go to Ohio and pick up these metamaterials from Rendlesham and then take them to Hal in Austin, Texas. And I told Sean right there, or I told Lou right there, that I have this concern. Hal appears to have been in Scientology. I was just reading a Wikipedia article, didn't really know any background. It was interesting, again, looking back, to see how Lou defended that. And he told me, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the direct quote, but he told me that Hal Puthoff had been assigned to Scientology by the CIA because the CIA wanted Hal to acquire the technology that the Scientologists used to test the Thetans or whatever it was. So Lou was either believing it, regurgitating it, or lying, I don't know which, and telling me that Hal was not really that involved in Scientology, and he was only there at the behest of the CIA.
And let's backtrack a little bit. So how did you, like, when you're dealing with Lou, like, where did Puthoff come into the equation?
Twice. It was that day during that conversation, and then one time earlier before, where I had a Zoom call with several of the folks from Skyhub, Jim Semivan and Hal Puthoff, all together at the same time, and we were talking about how best to position the Skyhub and how I was, doing the mobile applications with it and things like that. And Hal and Jim were on that call, but that was something that I had coordinated, not from Lou. But I've only ever had really 3 interactions, if you want to consider one email, with Hal.
And so what were their thoughts on this? What did they advise or anything?
Hal, the thing that I remember the most is and this is silly thinking about it, but I read it and it went in my head and I kept it there. I had sent my email to Hal after the conversation with the Skyhub folks. I was basically just doing an introduction saying, hey, I'm the guy that was on the TV show with Lou, blah, 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 blah. Here's why I'm doing this. I'm in it for the data, things like that. And then Hal responds and says, thank you for doing what you're doing. We can all work together to get all this. And I'm just like you. I want answers. And Jim Semivan sent a very similar email saying that he was in it for the data and the science as well. So,
And so, what is your take on Jim Semivan? Because again, he's one of those people that just kind of popped out of the woodwork and claims to have all these credentials. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but he definitely seems to be with a core group of people that has been stirring a particular narrative and potentially grifting for a long time.
yeah. One of the things that you'll realize about me is I don't know a lot. So I don't know. I don't know what Jim's deal is. I've only ever had that one call and the one email exchange with him. I know he's spoken about the Bledsoes a lot. Matthew, it's with an I, Semi, Semivan, Van. So I don't know his motivations. I won't pretend to assume to know his motivations. I'm not in anybody's head, and I don't want to make assumptions that I'm not factually correct on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate that. And so, okay, so you've got this group of people. Where did the metamaterials? Let's talk a little bit more about the metamaterials, because sweet mother of pearl, that's a good story.
Yeah. So the metamaterials happened without any warning, without any advanced input from Sean or Lou or anything. We were sitting in his kitchen and we were planning this shot that we were going to do in his living room. And Justin and Dustin wanted to set it up so it looked like an informal interview was occurring in Lou's living room, and that's exactly how it comes across. If you look at the teaser trailer that came out that Stephen Greenstreet put up, you can see it. You can hear Lou's words, and Lou just told us minutes before we did the shot that he was going to say something that was going to be very spectacular, and to be prepared to capture it on camera. And that's exactly what we caught. It was him saying that he wanted us, Sean and I, to take the Osiris and drive to Ohio and pick up, and he even does the quotes, the air quotes. He wants us to pick up these alleged metamaterials and then take them and deliver them to Hal Puthoff for analysis in Austin, Texas. And for 15 minutes there, I was like, this is awesome. This is absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be ferrying around some material that could be potentially the most important things ever held by human hands. Right? This is material that came from a UFO in Rendlesham, and then reality kicked me in the ass.
So where did the Rendlesham thing come in? Who put that into the narrative?
Lou.
Oh, okay.
Lou. It came straight from Lou. I mean, my passport's expired. There's no way I could get to Europe, and I sure as hell can't drive there. But when reality kicked in, I'm like, wait a minute. This doesn't make any sense. My vehicle is 23 years old and held together with hope and duct tape. I have a liability-only insurance policy from Geico. I've got old tires, and I'm not entirely certain that I'm going to make it back to Vegas, much less drive from Las Vegas to Ohio to Austin, Texas, and back to Las Vegas. Why me? Why not an armored car surrounded by U.S. Marshals? Why not have a $20 billion insurance policy on this? And why the hell wait for a television show before you send it off for analysis? This makes no sense. And yeah.
I mean, and Christian Lambright, it's nice to see Christian in chat, hope and duct tape. That's a good line for the ages, and it is. And that Hope and Duct Tape, that sounds like Bigelow, Aerospace, duct tape. Well, anyway, so yeah, so okay, so you've got so the Rendlesham, the metamaterials are coming into play, and like you said, it's like here you've got these special things, and yet you're just transporting them across state lines, and hey, no worries. And I mean, this is when you look back at things, like, don't you feel like I do, like a complete
Putz.
oh my god, yeah.
Total putz.
I mean, you can't even make this up.
There is no blame at all that I put on Jake or Justin or Dustin. I think that they were manipulated just as much. They had, I mean, Justin and Dustin got paid by Jake. Jake put his own money into this project to pay Justin and Dustin to get them out there. Jake is the one that flew everybody to Wyoming. Jake put, I don't know, $17,000 or $20,000 into making that project occur.
Wow.
And I can't fault Jake or Justin or Dustin for going along with it, because they're doing their jobs. Their job was to produce, to direct, to film, things like that. I'm the dumbass that was believing the stuff that was told to me. So I mean, honestly, I've talked to Jake. I've talked to him within the last 2 weeks, and I've apologized to him for wasting his money. And things are cool between myself and Jake. Things are cool between myself and Justin and Dustin. We all still converse. We all still have conversations. But I think in one way or another, we were all promised things that never came to fruition.
Wow. I mean, and yeah, and I remember, I was down filming a TV show in Austin, and met Nick Redfern down there, and we spent some time down in Texas and going throughout. But I remember having, I was acquaintances, friends, quote unquote, whatever I was, with Eric Davis at the time. Eric and I spent a lot of time talking on the phone, messaging back and forth, and I really liked him. He was a goofy nerd, and whatever, but I arranged, and I met both he and Hal at Earth Tech, and got the behind the scenes, tour of this place, and this is the equipment that could allegedly be testing materials, but there were never any materials to test. I mean, just all this stuff. And then we've got the Collins elite, dun dun dun, the secret, these people behind the scenes who are trying to stop funding for this, that have these religious alt-right ties. And it's just like, oh my God, you guys, seriously? I mean, these guys seriously probably have shots of tequila and sit around a bar and go, oh, what kind of crap can we make up? And how stupid are people going to be to buy this?
Well, the funny thing is, Lou drinks Chardonnay.
Chardonnay. Oh,
Lou is a Chardonnay drinker.
Oh,
I found that to be very entertaining.
Find.
Yeah, but I feel, and this is my opinion, I'm not saying it is the case. I'm not stating it as a direct fact, because I don't know. This is one of the rare instances that I'll actually make an assumption. I feel that the people that are the closest to Lou are also the ones that have a significant amount of damage to them before they're close to Lou. God knows I did. And the people that have come out to me since then privately, and I'm not going to name names or anything, they've all admitted to me that, and all of them have admitted to me that they've had, major life issues happening during the time that they were being recruited by Lou. And it seems as if there's a very specific personality type a very specific personality need by those types, a need to feel validated, a need to feel appreciated, a need to feel like you're doing something worthwhile. And it seems like it's a very blatant, obvious, and purposeful pattern.
And that's really
So
sad to me, to prey on people who have you know what I mean? That's just really, anyway, it's wrong. It's the same thing I've seen with specific people that I've mentioned. But I mean, and so what were some of I don't want to go back to that specific, time that you talk about where you were with, Lou at his home, but what were some of the claims that Lou made to you about, I mean, did he have any shape-shifting experiences with aliens? Like, what were some of the way out things that he might have said?
he did tell me things. I don't want to repeat them because as much as I don't like what happened to me, and I may still be getting played, and I don't know, but I feel that some of the things that he told me that happened to him may be actually deeply personal to him, and I don't want to air that because it doesn't affect me. It doesn't have any relevancy to my story. I think he told me two things. One, I think, is complete and total bullshit. The other one I'm not so certain about, but I don't want to call him out for it and drag that out into the public because it may be real, and it's not something that I want to do.
Okay. And so did he ever talk about remote viewing?
Well, he tried to remote view me, or he at least alluded to the fact that he did remote view me. This was wild. This was something that I was calling bullshit on as it happened, but I didn't fully put it together until after several days after the event because I couldn't stop thinking about it. We were in Lou's kitchen / dining room, and it was myself. My wife was actually there, but she had gone to bed. So it was myself, Lou, Sean. I want to say that it was Jake that was there. It was either Jake or Justin. And we were having a discussion at Lou's table, one of the more woo esoteric discussions about realities and the nature of the world and things like that. And Lou was asked by, I think, Justin about remote viewing. And Lou grabs a napkin and a Sharpie, and he starts drawing on this napkin these boxes. And he labels these boxes realm 1, realm 2, 3, and 4, and so on. And he starts describing what remote viewing is. And it was counter to what I had thought that I had known at the time. But he goes, this is, if you're remote viewing and you go here, this is being able to see objects. This realm is when you can see people. This realm is when you can see people, but in different times. And then he goes, in this realm over here, if you go into this realm, there's no humanity here, and you can get lost, and you might not make it back. So don't go to this realm. This is your reaction that you just had right there is basically the reaction that I was having.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was doing that on my inside voice.
No, that was
okay.
Very, very evident outside. So I was having the exact same reaction. And Lou saw it, and he stopped. He stopped the conversation, and Lou was sitting directly to my right-hand side, and puts the paper down, puts the pen or the Sharpie down, and he reaches over with his left hand, and he puts his left hand on my right arm, and he grasps my right arm, and he kind of drops his head a little bit, and then he starts talking to me without talking to me, if that makes any sense. And he's telling me that, my daughter is going to go to the most prestigious university in the United States. She's going to get a full ride scholarship. He's telling me things that are going to happen at specific dates and times. And he's like, I've got the note that I wrote down, so don't take this as a direct quote, but he was like, in a year and 3 months, or a year and 4 months, or 2 years and 3 months, whatever it was, this thing is going to happen, and you're going to look back on it. And his exact words were, you're going to think that son of a bitch was right.
Is he friends with John Edwards? I don't know.
So I'm not buying it, and he can see that I'm not buying it because my body language. And Lou's not a dumb guy. He is a counterintelligence officer, and they're trained on interrogation interview techniques. And I'm sure he could read my body language, knowing that mentally I'm saying this is absolute crap. So then he goes into this thing about something that's going to happen to me in X number of years and months. And he goes, and you're going to have a very, very hard time getting over this. And this pissed me off. This pissed me off a lot. And this is something that I'm detailing in part 4 of my articles, and I'll kind of go into it a little bit here. But it made me mad. And it made me mad because, if you remember, I'm open to the idea of woo being real. I'm open to the idea that there is some sort of consciousness aspect to a portion of the phenomena. I want the data. I want the numbers. I believe in the nuts and bolts of it, but I'm open to this other possibility. What he said to me was not invited. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want to know it. And for him to involuntarily tell me what's going to happen to me in the future is one of the most unethical things I could ever think that could be done to another human being outside of blatant torture and physical abuse. Because he didn't give me details. And when I asked for details, he refused to give me the details. He planted a seed in my head because I still have a little piece that's open to the idea that the woo is real. And he put that damn seed in my head. So every single damn day since then, I look at my calendar, I count the days, and I imagine what's going to happen if Lou is actually right. What am I going to be faced with? Is it going to be the death of a family member? Is somebody going to die in a house fire? Am I going to fall down and break my neck and be paralyzed for the rest of my life? What the hell did he see, if he saw anything, if any of this is even remotely real? I didn't want it. I didn't ask for it. And it was bullshit for him to do that.
And again, that's just another way to manipulate people and get into their, yeah, I mean, and that's, yeah, I'm sorry that
Yeah.
I did that.
I mean, my rational brain is screaming at me every day that he was lying, he was being P.T. Barnum, and this was all showmanship to groom an asset for his personal purposes.
Right.
That's my rational brain. But there's this tiny little synaptic section somewhere back there that goes, but what if he's right? And that's what eats at me. And that's what makes me so damn mad at what he did.
And I think, great comments, you guys, tonight in chat. I really appreciate this. And Havelock is saying, it's a great psyop technique. I mean, these obviously, these people are really proficient at just manipulation. And
it's brain rape.
It is. And, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, when I was talking about that young fellow that was killed by police officers, I mean, here he is. And he had mentioned in the 911 call that he'd so desperately made when he was frightened out of his mind. I mean, he'd had a spiritual awakening, and he was, he was seeing shapeshifters and skinwalkers. And I mean, it's so sad that so many people who are put in positions, whether you're mentally unstable, whether you're suffering from a trauma, whether you're just looking for answers because this is a cool thing to do. It's like you go down these rabbit holes, and there are people like this willing and ready to mind rape you.
Yeah.
And that
And the
is
fact that
wrong.
I asked him for clarification details, and he refused to give it to me. And at that point, when I asked for the clarification, he goes, "No, this is private. This is your life. You don't want to know." Which I'm like, "You just put this on me, and now you're refusing to give me details."
What a
That
blowhard.
is an asshole move. I'm sorry.
And that you mentioned in the article, that you had been having a conversation with Cahill, and I mean, potentially was Cahill feeding him information. Obviously, Lou got some things wrong in specific things that he was putting forward, and so it's like this. It's like this, being at a circus, and one person's over here collecting information, and then this other circus clown is over here,
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, okay, well, wait a minute." I mean, this is like one of the oldest freaking tricks in the book.
I honestly hope, and if Sean is watching this, if my detractors are watching it, whatever, I honestly hope that Sean is as played as I was, because I don't want Sean to be the person that knew what's going on and still participated. I want him to have been played like me and fell for it and continues to fall for it, because I don't want him to be complicit.
I know, and you hope that people aren't like that, and then I mean, so many of us get manipulated, and it's like and I remember, for a period of time when I was manipulated by the people involved with a specific fantasy ranch. I'm just going to call it fantasy ranch, and then I can think of little tattoo out there, the plane. I mean, come to fantasy ranch, and we're going to make up a bunch of crap. And anyway, I'm just going off on my little tangent, but it's like, you get it's just the whole thing is so
Well, it's unethical.
it is unethical. It is just it's mind-blowing and wrong and sick, and then it is. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And so what do you, I mean, would you be willing to just share any text or anything that you had with Elizondo? Because I know some people are like, okay, this is great, and they're totally giving you props for coming forward. Is there anything?
I don't want to yet.
Okay.
And I'll explain why. The thing that I showed with Alec Dietrich, it's there's no way that she could get upset with it. There's no slander or libel or anything like that. I mean, it was a pleasant conversation. I have no problem showing that. What I'm putting in the article, and I'll say it again, if I put it in bold with italics and quotes, I've got the receipts for it. And I can prove that that is what was said. I am not an attorney. I don't know what legalities I could be subjecting myself to if I took a year's worth of text messages and emails and voice notes. And when I say voice notes, I don't mean things that I record. I mean when somebody's using the Signal app and records something and then sends it because they don't want to move their thumbs and make the text. So I've got that. I've got a year's worth of these conversations. And I don't know what the legalities are in releasing them. If the New York Times decided that they were going to pay my attorney's fees to get copies of all these and indemnify me and give me the legalese saying that I wasn't violating any laws or anything like that, then I might. I might give them all. I might give them some of them. I might give them nothing. I don't know. I'm not writing the articles because I feel the need to take anybody down. I'm writing the articles because for over a year, I was subjected to a tremendous amount of hate, of vitriol, of attacks. And I want people to know that the story that they think they know about me is not accurate. And that I did things and said things and participated in things under false pretenses. And I feel like I was manipulated and turned to do things that I shouldn't have been doing. And I'm writing these stories to get, and I'll correct myself, I'm writing these articles to get this off of my chest. And once I'm done with it, I might just be done with it. I don't know yet.
I think we've all been there and done that. And I know, for myself, I as well have years worth of messages and recordings and, all sorts of things of these people, promoting their crap. And again, I'll decide what I will release when I want to release it and know legally that I can do that. But at the same point in time, it's like these people are kind of holding, it's like that's their one thing. Oh, we're going to call Danny Sheehan. What? We're going to call this lawyer over here who's a complete nut job, and we're going to threaten people. And Elizondo's going to, or Fugel's going to do A, B, C, and D and threaten people. And it's like, at the end of the day, if this stuff was out there, maybe other people might need a lawyer to defend their actions.
I'll tell you the honest truth. I don't want to be sued. I have a house. I have a mortgage. My daughter's in private school. I've got a life. I've got a wife. I don't want the legal repercussions that would come from being sued. The other side of me kind of actually wants it to happen. I would love for Lou's top Kentucky super lawyer of 2019 to come after me for a slander or a libel case, because at that point in time, I could take every email, every voice note, every text message that I ever got and submit them in my defense, and they become public record.
Right.
And then the world would actually see that I didn't release them for nefarious purposes, that I did so in my defense, and they will see that everything that I wrote is actually accurate.
And I think that that's absolutely spot on. And I have thrown that out there with regard to certain people here in Utah. It's like, okay, you're going to threaten me with a lawsuit, then let's go to court because, let's disclose all of this. I would love to do that. I would love to disclose the recordings of people coming into my studio and threatening my family and threatening and trying to pull me into absolute crap.
Yeah.
Because they're full of it. Bring it on. I got it. And let me just say this on record. I have made sure that information is out to many people that I trust. So if, anything happens, there you go.
You got to think that the Osiris was built to record audio and video and other telemetry data. And it turns on when I start it. Sean rode with me from Las Vegas to Buffalo, Wyoming, which is a 2-day drive. So he and I were in the car together for 2 entire days when my dash camera and my GoPros and everything in that vehicle was recording everything that was talked about. So again, if I put it in bold with italic letters and in quotes, it's because it's a direct quote from something that I can go back and reference.
And that's great. I want to just, Venny is in chat, and she just said she's responded to Havelock, just saying that all the, people that are would be objecting to citing NDAs in the discovery process would be a battle. And so I just want to say, Venny, with that in mind, and it's getting late, Mama's brain is kind of turning off, but with that in mind, if there are things that are taking place that are potentially illegal, when does an NDA fly out the window?
There's a typical clause inside of an NDA, and boilerplate NDAs, even specialized NDAs, normally have a clause that allows you to release the information upon demand from a court of competent jurisdiction. So you still can't release it unless there's a court order that forces you to do so in contravention to the NDA.
Interesting. So I just want to ask you, did Cahill have any idea that you were potentially recording him?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
I mean, most of the things that I have from Cahill are voice notes that he voluntarily recorded, pressed send, and sent them to me. Nevada is a one-party consent state, so you can record a phone call in Nevada without the other party knowing, as long as you know that you're recording the call.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, the vast majority of the things that I have are from the GoPros, from the dash cam, from emails and texts and things that were voluntarily sent back and forth. So, but again, I haven't released those. I haven't put a screenshot out there. I haven't, held up my phone and said, here's the quote from Sean Cahill where he's talking about David Fravor. I haven't done that. Yes, I have sent them to private parties. I have sent them to individuals, but not a public release. So,
yes, it is interesting. And Utah's a one-party state as well. So, so just throwing that out there. But it is, it is very, the whole thing is interesting. And I wanted to say, when, I appreciate the comments.
Well, one quick interjection.
Yeah.
A lot of people take me to task for recording, which I don't care. I'm going to continue to do it. But just imagine if Eric Davis had a tape recorder instead of a notepad.
Don't think he probably didn't. I mean, these people.
Would that have not solved so much stuff?
Yes, that's true. That's true. When you watch the portal open up, I mean, I know the whole thing is just like, oh my Lord, I don't even know what to say. But now that we can step back and look at things and just collect our thoughts, it's like, wow, this has been really interesting. And I appreciate you being so candid and talking about things. And I will say that the one thing that is interesting that I did, I've heard, and one of my friends sent me a message today, Lou and his team are not commenting on what you've put forward.
Well, Sean did one comment. He said that he had woken up, and I'm again paraphrasing, that he had woken up that morning to a litany of fictitious statements from people that he had chosen not to work with due to unprofessional behavior or something like that. And he said he would leave the lies to the lawyers. I haven't received a phone call. I haven't received a letter. I haven't received a process server. Nobody's come to my door. I'm not being sued. So I think that it's probably, again, dangerous to assume, but I think it's a safe assumption that I'm not going to be sued for anything in those articles, because more than likely the discovery process in that lawsuit would be vastly entertaining.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate you being here. And when I read what you'd put out, I was just like, sweet, because you've endured, some backlash, obviously, and I've read it and seen it. And as everybody knows that it is here listening to the show, I've also received that same kind of backlash and things from a specific group of people. And it is a specific group of people. I'm sure a majority of them are actually one person hiding behind, their little screen names and whatnot. But it is interesting. And I think it's very important for other people to come forward and talk about this, so other people who get involved in this are not being subjected to the same types of things that we have. So I appreciate you very, very much.
I want to know what the hell's up there. I'm open to a lot of different possibilities, but I don't know. I mean, I've seen things, we've recorded things, UAPX has data on things, but we still don't know. And all of this game theory, all of this social engineering, all of this crap that we're being subject to is not getting us any closer to the truth.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then I want to have you back on the show when we can talk about what you've done and some of the ways that we can move, things forward. And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate your candor and being on the show and talking about this, because for me, unfortunately, as much as I would love to talk about UFOs and research, we have to shine a spotlight on this. And we also, for us to move forward and to actually productively research something that needs to be researched. And so I thank you for everything. So
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
absolutely. And we will stay in contact, and I look forward to that. And thanks you guys for being here tonight and being here on a Saturday. This was kind of fun. And I think, Jeremy, you kind of inspired me to maybe do a Saturday show.
There you go.
I know. Sweet. So thank you. You take care of yourself, and we'll be looking for part 4 of your article, and just, be safe. Take care of yourself. And thanks, you guys, for supporting UFO Classified. Thanks for hanging out late with me. You guys stay safe, and rest assured I will be stirring up some trouble. And I want to also mention Jack Brewer and expandingfrontiersresearch.org, our new organization, a nonprofit who will be preserving research, collecting research, and working with people who are out doing field research. And we will be promoting positive things going forward. I look forward to inviting people into expanding research. And so you guys take care. Have a good night. Thank you, Jeremy. And we will catch you guys next Friday. I'm sure it'll be good. And maybe next Saturday. We'll see where it goes. So take care, you guys. Thank you.
All right.